Hey, how you doing? It's been a minute. So it feels good to be back. Unfortunately, the first video is not going to be about the sleds. Sorry about that, but I'm not riding yet. So Ontario did get a pretty good blast of winter finally. Let me show you why I'm not riding yet. This is not right. Now, I don't know if it's just bad luck, if it's climate change, if it's a bit of both, but I do know it's frustrating. So over the next week or so, I'm going to get the sleds cleaned up, get the chain case oil changed, and get them ready to ride. In the meantime, I thought I'd do some work on this old chainsaw. So I came across this saw in my friend's barn. It was damaged, it was in bad shape. It ended up that it was going to cost more to fix it than the saw itself was worth. He had a couple of other saws. He said, hey, why don't you keep it, see what you can do with it. So it actually looks pretty good right now. I've done a fair bit of cleanup on it. When I found it, it actually looked like this. So it had been sitting, it was filthy, dirty, covered in bird poop, and it had been squished from a run-in with a mini excavator. Now we did some work on it till we get it semi-usable, but lately I haven't even been able to get it started. So I'm going to replace some of these damaged parts and hopefully give this saw a new lease on life. And along the way, I'll show you how to install a new bar, how to tension your chain, clean your spark arrestor. Hopefully we'll get it running a little bit better too. So if any of that sounds interesting to you, hang out with me for a bit. So I'm certainly not an expert, but I do use chainsaws a fair bit with work. I have a number of chainsaws from this CS450, which is an 18-inch bar, a little bit smaller than that saw. I use a cordless chainsaw for pruning, and all the way down to this little tiny handheld chainsaw. So the garage is still fairly new. I'm still working out my shelving and storage options. It's also given me an opportunity to buy a lot of new tools. I love buying tools. Actually, if I'm honest, I like buying things a little bit too much, and I probably spent more than I needed to on this saw. Now, I don't know exactly what happened with this saw other than it had a run-in with a mini excavator, as chainsaws often do. So one of the problems with the saw, the front handle on it was bent right down against the body of the saw. So not only did that mean you couldn't hold the saw properly, but it was also bending the front brake down. And that's a pretty important safety feature. So when I got the saw, I took it over to my buddy Eric's. He actually has a big heavy vise on his workbench, and he's a lot better than I am at working with metal. So he managed to get this sort of straightened out enough that it could be used. If you look close, like this is aluminum and it's a pretty complex shape. So it's still not quite right. It presses down on this side of the body. I don't even know if that's going to pop up when we change this. Now, the other problem with the saw was with the chain brake. So because this handle had been bent down so bad, I don't know if the camera's going to pick this up. Right here, that plastic has got a kink in it now. So it does actually work, but it catches on the plastic here. All right, so I got most of the parts I need to get going on the saw. Spark plug. We have a new chain catcher. So that's just a little aluminum piece here. You'll see it when we take the cover off. I got a new handle for that chain brake in the front, and I got the new front handle. Now, I also bought a new bar for this saw. So the first reason is along the bottom of the bar, I can see where it looks burned. So it makes me wonder if the saw was either not oiling properly or it was run without bar oil. So obviously as this chain rotates around the bar, it creates friction, it creates heat, wear on those moving parts. So you need to make sure that it's lubricated properly, which is why on the front of your chainsaw, you've got this little cap where you can add bar oil. So every time you fill your chainsaw with gas, it's a good idea to refill that bar oil reservoir. Now, one of the problems that I found with this saw was the O-ring under that filler cap was split, so it was leaking out bar oil. So I've replaced that. The other way you can tell it's time to start thinking about a new bar, if you've got a lot of side-to-side slop on the chain, that is telling you that the groove that the drive teeth sit in is getting worn out. And then you compare that to a new bar, there's very little play. Now there is another reason why I replaced this bar, and it actually added quite a bit to the cost of rebuilding the saw. And I know it's stupid, but it's just shiny and silver and it says Echo. So I do the same thing with the sleds. I replaced plastic on that old 670 just because it looked a bit worn. So I know it's not practical and I know it's not cost effective, and I probably should have made sure that this saw is still running before I spent all this money, but what are you gonna do? I mean, the front handle alone was like $100 plus shipping, plus taxes, but I didn't want to just junk the saw or just let it go for parts. You know, if you think about it, the whole point of this channel is that you can still get a lot of use out of old machines. But it's fun for me, and it's my money, so don't judge me. And don't tell my wife. So the chain brake's a pretty important safety feature. So when it's forward, the brake is engaged and your chain can't turn. You disengage the brake for cutting. The whole reason you've got this handle here is if your saw kicks back while you're cutting, it'll hit your wrist and it'll engage the brake, stop the chain before it makes contact with your body. So I'm going to start by taking the side cover off. Always disengage your chain brake before you take the side cover off. So with those 2 1/2-inch nuts off, we can take the side cover off. So the way that chain brake works is a metal band inside the side cover. When you move the lever, that band tightens around the clutch and stops the chain from turning. That's why you always want to make sure you disengage that brake before you take the side cover off. So the tensioner that controls how tight the chain is actually part of this side cover. So with this off, I can just move the bar and take it right off. And with the bar off, we can go ahead and take the old chain off as well. So I did actually buy a new chain. I think I'm going to put the old one back on just to practice sharpening it a little bit. So I'm going to take this cover plate off. Looks like there's only one screw holding it on. Hopefully there's no springs behind it that pop out. Well, just see what happens. If there are, I'll figure out how to put it back together. But I'll take this off. We'll clean that out. I'll probably use some compressed air and a rag, get it cleaned up and put it back together. And then we can replace these handles and that chain brake. So again, I don't know. There's nothing going to come popping out of here, but you never learn if you don't try. So let's see what happens. Now, to make sure we don't lose any parts like these little screws, these little magnetic dishes are great. I got this one at Princess Auto. I think it was about $3. So I'm just going to use a standard screwdriver and a bit of compressed air, and we will clean this debris out of here. So I'm seeing a lot of bar oil both on the bar itself and back in behind here. So I'm going to assume that oiler is working. We'll actually test that once we got the saw together. We can just run it. We can see if it's oiling. Okay, we can put this plate back on. Okay, while we're at it, I may as well replace this chain catcher. It's number 4 hex. So the job of the chain catcher is to trap and stop the chain if it breaks. So in normal operation, the chain should never touch it. Now, because this one is marked up like that, kind of suggests that the saw has been run at some point with the chain too loose. So if yours looks like this one, you might want to make sure your chain is a little bit tighter. Okay, now I'm going to go ahead and take this front handle off because the chain brake lever is actually underneath it. So I'll do this one first. Okay, now let's go ahead and take this chain brake off. Oh, for a minute I thought I had the wrong part. The holes were different size, but there's some metal grommets that go in there. Now, I'm not sure of the torque spec for this, so I'm just going to snug it up good and make sure that it can still move freely. So without putting it all back together, we'll just kind of test fit this side panel and make sure that that brake will still engage and disengage. And it does. All right, let's go ahead and see if our new handle fits. This is an older saw, so you always kind of hold your breath a little bit when you order parts. Okay, it looks like we are in business. So again, this is all plastic and aluminum, so I'm not going to crank any of these too tight, but we want to make sure that they're good and snug. Okay, that looks pretty good. I think Next thing we'll do is pull the spark plug and have a look at it. This is pretty cool, actually. If you've got spark plug wires, sometimes on lawnmowers and things like that, they're kind of hard to reach or pull off. You end up racking your fingers up. This is a little thing for pulling the wires off. This is often a really cheap fix when you've got something that isn't starting or running properly. It's just a spark plug. So that's actually pretty dark and oily. So the saw is running rich. It should be kind of a brown, nice tan color. But that to me looks like this saw is running rich. So remember that fuel air is a ratio, right? It's not, if something's rich, it doesn't just mean it's getting too much gas. It could be getting not enough air. So if your plug is dark and oily like that, it can be a couple of things. Sometimes it can indicate excessive wear. So things like rings. I did check the compression on the saw. We've got almost 160 PSI. So I think it is worth fixing up. The other thing it can be if the saw is running rich. Too much fuel in relation to air in the fuel air mixture. Two reasons for that. If you're choking it excessively, so you should only have that choke out till you get that first little pre-start, and then you should be pushing it back in and starting it. The reason I think this saw may be not running well and looking like this is that this air filter was completely plugged solid with sawdust. So I've blown it out a little bit with the compressed air. I've ordered a new one. It's on the way. I suspect that's why, because it's restricting the airflow. This plug actually doesn't look too bad. I'm going to go ahead and replace it anyway. All right, here's another bonus tip for those of you that use your saws in the winter, like, I don't know, snowmobilers. A lot of saws will have like a winter operation mode. I know steel saws do. I don't have an example here, but both of these Echo saws, if you take the air filter cover off, inside there's a little rubber plug that has a summer and a winter position. Now, what I think it does, that winter position leaves a little channel open here, and I think that lets warm air flow from around the spark plug into the compartment where the air filter is. But that can make the saw overheat in warmer temperatures. So remember, when the temperature gets above the temperature specified in your manual, so in this case it's 5 degrees, you got to put that plug back into the summer position. All right, let's go ahead and put our shiny new bar on. So we're just going to put it on the saw, and then we're going to push it back as far as it goes to give us room to put the chain on. So we're going to put our chain back on. We want to make sure that the cutting teeth are facing the right direction. So we just turn our clutch a little bit and make sure the chain is engaged with the drive teeth. Okay, I'm just going to go ahead and put my side cover back on. Next thing we're going to do is set the chain tension. So you're going to have an adjuster somewhere on your saw. Usually they're either on the front of the saw like this one, there's a little screw right here, or in the back on the front of the saw itself. So the first thing you want to do is you want to make sure that these nuts are loose enough that you've got a little play in your bar. You want to make sure you hold the end of that bar up. Then you want to turn your adjuster until the chain is snug with the bottom of the bar. And then you want to go ahead and tighten these nuts up. So when you talk to different people, some guys are going to say, oh, I like to run my saw a little bit tight. Some are going to say, oh, I like to run it a little bit loose. Basically, you pull it down, it should snap back up to the bar. If it's hanging below that bar, then you've got it too loose. So once you've got everything tightened back up with your chain brake disengaged, you should be able to spin your chain smoothly along the bar without it binding. All right, last thing I'm going to do is clean out the screen on the spark arrestor. So that's a little screen on your muffler. It's meant to trap sparks and prevent it from starting fires. They do get an accumulation of carbon over time, and that can make your saw run rough. So I'm going to take it off, hit it with some brake cleaner and compressed air. So I'm actually kind of surprised this one doesn't look bad at all. A little bit of carbon buildup on it, but you can see lots of light through it. All right, so we got the saw back together with our chain tensioned. I have dumped the old fuel out. I don't know how long it's been sitting there. I'm going to add some fresh fuel, and then I'm going to put a couple ounces of seafoam into it just to clean it out, because I suspect it's pretty dirty on the inside as well. Okay, nothing left to do but put the cover back on and see how it starts. you go. The saw is running, and it seems like it's running really well. It was a little bit smoky when it started up, and I kind of expected that. It's been sitting there with all that old dirty fuel in there. So, but yeah, no, it seems to be working. It's oiling. I can see that because I can see oil on the chain, and I can see a little bit of oil coming off. The camera didn't pick it up, but you can see oil coming off the end of the chain. So yeah, we know it's working the way it should. So next up, I'm going to sharpen this chain, and we'll try cutting some wood with it, but I think we're good. So, and another bit of good news, we've actually been having some snow while I've been putting this video together. So not a whole lot yet, but I'm hoping we're going to get these sleds out soon. All right, so in the meantime, I hope you enjoyed that video. If you learned something new or you just enjoyed spending the time with me, do me a favor, hit that thumbs up. Until next time, I'm David Clark. Thanks for taking the time to watch. Saw, get it running again, and hopefully along the way you're going to learn a two or these little magnetic dishes are actually really good. So the garage is still fairly new. I'm still kind of working out all my so I'm no expert. That happens more than you think.